Hey, my name is Lo. I'm a film composer with close to 20 years of experience, and this is the Behringer Model D. So the question is, why the Model D and why Behringer? Well, I can't deny this is just a very well-cloned version of the Mini Milk. There are so many different clones out there in hardware and in plugin format. A lot of them sound really good, but the Behringer has a couple of things going for itself that just makes it work the best for my workflow. And here's why. Hardware versus software. I just love having the ability to use both hands and quickly dial in whatever idea I have in my head. There's just nothing I hate more than skipping through presets. It gets me out of my flow and often gets me away from the first idea that I had in my head. And over the years, I learned that my first instinct is always the best. The layout of the Model D is just so simple and clean that it's my go-to synth for most of my basses and a lot of my leads. Sometimes I even use it for pads, but I'll show you more about that later. I can tell you that in the last 7 years, there is not one project I worked on where the Model D didn't find itself into the score in some kind of way. What makes the Mini Milk so great? Well, the Mini Milk is kind of the archetype of West Coast synthesis, and 90% of synths that you play around with are based off of this archetype. So you could see the Model D as the mother of all synths. So why did I choose the Behringer? Well, the fact that the Behringer Model D is so cheap and readily available makes it just extremely reliable. Even if this one breaks down, I know I can get my hands on another one right away and keep my project going. Although I'm a sucker for the big knobs on the original synth and some of its clones, I really love the small form factor that it has. Over the years, I collected a bunch of synths that are small desktop synths, and I love having the option to put them in front of me and start working on my projects, and all my synths are like right in the sweet spot. I don't have to move around. When I work on a film, I often just choose a couple of small synths that I plop on my desk right in front of me, and they are the synth that I built this specific score with. This gives me a fast workflow and makes that the score sounds cohesive. I kind of see it as the instruments of a band. Okay, this has been more than enough talking. Let's go over the layout and start making some sounds. Here is the layout of the Model D. Let's start with the oscillators. We have 3 oscillators here, 1, 2, and 3. They all 3 have a master tune with the tuner over here, and then oscillator 2 and oscillator 3 are tuned towards oscillator 1. This is the thing, you're tuning a lot with old synths like this, but a lot of the sound that the synth actually gives is into the tuning and it being out of tune at points. Okay, these 3 oscillators run into the mixer session over here. Volumes for oscillator 1, 2, and 3. Then we have an extra volume for noise. This is either white noise or pink noise. And then we have the 5th volume over here, which is the external volume. You can run external oscillators into the Model D. We're going to play with that later. But a trick that people used to do back in the days was they would take the headphone out and put that back into the external input and then crank it, and that would take the whole sound of the oscillators and then run it back into the mixer and it will start distorting. The Behringer Model D gave the option to have this extra knob here. If you click this, it will take the output and the end and run that back into the mixer session. And as you will hear over here, and I see the overload button, and there, and you hear how it sounds distorting. It just sounds super fat, and it's always a fun little thing to play with if you're having a sound, you're liking it, and you kind of want to give it that little extra grit. I always just turn on that button, crank that, see what happens. It makes it sound like really crazy at points, which is awesome. But sometimes it's also too much, so you kind of have to play with that and see what works and what doesn't. And the mixer has 5 buttons over here, and these are basically the mute buttons for the 5 knobs that the mixer has. So we got oscillator 1, oscillator 2, oscillator 3, we got our noise, and we got our external, and now we got everything on 10. Let's have a look at the oscillator. So triangle, saw, shark, and then 3 different kinds of pulse waves. And then we have a range of 6 octaves. This is from lower than we can hear that's a humongous range per oscillator. You gotta know, because they're analog oscillators, if you switch them an octave higher, you often have to repitch them to see if they're still in pitch. And this is kind of part of the sound, and kind of the sound that is often missing within the plugins. Within the plugins, they track very well over the whole range. An analog synth like this doesn't. Like, the oscillators itself don't track perfectly. You can open it up, and with a screwdriver in the back, you can make sure that it pitches as good as possible. But to me, a lot of the sound and the character that a synth like this has is the fact that it doesn't track perfectly. So if you play throughout your notes, things will always shift a little bit, which is way closer to how like a normal bass player would play. You don't play every note perfectly on spots. So to me, that is an absolute pro, but I also understand that there's people that really don't like that and like the plugin versions that are bang on tune constantly. What makes the sound so fat is if we take one of the oscillators and it's the detuning of the oscillator that really gives that fat moog sound. Next up, we have the super fat sounding moog ladder filter. It always just sounds super deep. If you turn up the, as they call it, emphasis, but nowadays we call this resonance, it gets this really tight sound, but it's also very well known that in the old Moog filters, it takes away the lows. Like, listen to this. And if I turn it off, it has like way more deep low end. In a lot of the replicas, they use a little bit of a different filter that keeps that low end, even if you push the resonance. To me, I totally understand why this is done, and often that is a kind of filter that you're looking for. But personally, I really like that it, as soon as you push the resonance, that it takes off the low frequencies. This makes your leads very easily sit in the mix. It makes it way easier to mix, and you just don't have that build up in the low end. And if you have a lead and you really wanted to cut through in your song, you kind of don't want that low end. I normally would cut that out even. To me, it's not a problem at all. I think it's a funny quirk that really works for me. But you have to know that as soon as you use the resonance on this filter, it will dip the low end. Another thing I want to show you is that when you use the filter and you will take the original sound back in like we did earlier, here, listen to what happens. If you click it in, it is super. It sounds like super grimy and dirty. And if you push up the resonance, it totally has its own sound. Listen to that. And if I would take it out, I really love how those distorted feedback sounds are working in that filter. It's a lot of fun to play with. I use it a lot in my scores. ADSR, or should we call it ADS? It is attack, decay, and sustain. And the sustain is actually between the attack and the decay. So ADSR didn't really came out until like 4 years later when ARP came out with their first synths, and when Oberheim was also taking that on, ADSR kind of became the standard. But for now we only have attack, decay and sustain. The attack and decay section sounds super smooth and round. It makes the bass sounds like really fat and round and sit well in the mix. Sometimes I wish they had a punchier version, but thank God this Behringer version has an input for the filter and the loudness control, so I can send an ADSR straight from my computer, or if I want to, I'll take one out of my modular synthesis and I can get to like super punchy sound for whatever I want to have these like super punchy ARPs going on. Another thing that I really love is like next to like the super simplicity and the easiness to like dial in any sound you want is the fact that we have an external in that then goes through the whole routing. So I can take any kind of oscillator and route that back in. So for instance, over here I have like a super easy wavetable, and let's grab and let's put that one into the external in. This is the synth as we have it. And now we can add the wavetable in there. You hear how fat this sounds? And this is just one option, but think about it, like you can grab any oscillator and you can add that to the 3 already like massively sounding analog oscillators. This really makes it super versatile and so easy and fast to dial in exactly that sound that you want for this track. Play it in, record it, and you're ready to go. Thanks for watching. This was a quick overview of the Behringer Model D and how I use it in my workflow. Do you use the Model D as well? Let me know what you think of it, and I'll catch you next time.